Good afternoon, everyone. This is Colin Dhillon from the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association. You're here today as we discuss cyber best practices for remote access and telework in this COVID era. We will begin within the next 60 seconds. Thank you. Good afternoon. Again, Colin Dhillon from the APMA. We will begin the webinar titled Cyber Best Practices for Remote Access and Telework. A little bit of housekeeping before we begin this 1-hour webinar. Do keep your devices on mute. All questions should be typed in the chat option on this Zoom meeting, and we will be accessing any questions throughout the conversation between our two specialists, and the webinar is going to be recorded and made available on the APMA website. The APMA has been supporting the auto sector for over 68 years. As an advocacy organization, our support has been with regulatory and policies that directly affect the auto parts supplying sector. And now we're including the digitization of our entire industry from the vehicle to the factory. The APMA has been leading in initiatives around connected and autonomous vehicles, Industry 4.0, and cybersecurity, making sure that our members and multiple levels of government are fully prepared for what most call the largest disruption in the past 50 to 100 years. Maybe COVID-19 is going to be taking a piece of that as well. In 2019, the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association founded the Cybersecurity Committee, bringing together some of the individuals from not only the automotive sector, but blockchain, artificial intelligence, national security, insurance, and the cyber world. Within 9 months, this committee, this team developed and launched their first offering, which we call the CyberKit 1.0. It is a tool to assist the automotive sector with embracing and changing the culture when it comes to cybersecurity. In this unique COVID-19 pandemic, where what we're all going through, distance is being put between not only people, but also their workplaces. Working from home is nothing new. Many individuals have been doing this for many years, but working from home isn't cultural when it comes to the auto sector, and only a few have ever needed remote access. But now thousands upon thousands of employees are in that situation. For example, in the US, that number has jumped from 16% to 78% of employees that now need to work from home, and that's all sectors. How do we manage this securely and safely? How do companies protect their assets and intellectual property? And how, as an employee, are you protected? Our guest experts will discuss governance policies and procedures, cybersecurity awareness training, incident response plans, VPN, the pros and the cons, continuity plans, third-party apps like Zoom and pieces of software like Zoom, SaaS apps, and security and monitoring and threat management. Yes, we do expect to get through most of this over the next 55 minutes or so. I am Colin Dhillon. I am the Chief Technical Officer of the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association, and today we have with us our two guest speakers. First is Ajay Khan. Ajay is the CEO of CloudGRC and the co-founder of the APMA's Cybersecurity Committee. Ajay has over 20 years of experience in governance, risk, and compliance, and 13 years of experience in cybersecurity innovation and emerging technologies. During his time, Ajay has worked on cybersecurity and governance, risk, and compliance in both North America and throughout the Middle East, in multiple sectors, including the financial institutions, oil, gas, telecom, and retail and manufacturing. Ajay's cyber expertise includes building cyber governance strategies, policies and procedures, payment card security, cloud security, CASB, and automotive cybersecurity. Michael Micone is from Netscape and has over 15 years of experience building and growing businesses with disruptive technologies in Canada. He currently serves as the Regional Sales Director at Netscope, responsible for sales in Canada. Prior to Netscope, he spent several years in the networking and security industries, including Infoblox, where he assisted in a successful IPO. I would like to welcome you both.
Hi, good to be here.
Yes, thank you guys. Pleasure to be here.
So we have just over 54 minutes to go. We want to make sure there is ample time and room for everyone to be able to ask questions. So without further ado, maybe I can open up with a question, because I'm sure some people are asking about CyberKit 1.0 and really, what work has already been done? Is it now ready for execution? What are the next steps? And if Ajay could respond to that.
Yes, Colin, I think the CyberKit 1.0, which we completed in 2019 and launched in November of 2019, is a very unique document because that gives you a holistic path to becoming secure. If your organization is starting the journey and it is looking at how to become secure, which many organizations are during this COVID-19 pandemic situation, the APMA Cybersecurity Kit, the CyberKit, gives you the detailed outline on that. And the interesting thing about this document is I've been in cyber for 20 years now, and this document not only gives you a path, but it also gives you resources. So you can actually, like if you're looking for instant response planning, you can actually look at the resources which are mentioned in this CyberKit, and you can basically go to those resources and get best practices from there also. So this is a very holistic document. The various sections of this document covers from cybersecurity strategy, cyber governance. It looks at an interesting area right now, cybersecurity insurance, education and awareness, risk mitigation, supply chain cyber assessment. So it covers the entire spectrum of cybersecurity.
And I think just kind of, piping in, one of the challenges we identified from the get-go was the change of culture, as we've kind of labeled it. We felt that there was a need in the auto sector for embracing cybersecurity, and there were definite gaps, which obviously are of concern when it comes to managing cybersecurity, not only in an office environment, but also with all the IoT technology being added into the manufacturing sector. And so I think one of the objectives with this product is to allow a kind of a Coles notes, if I could describe it that way. If you are on the path to implementing cybersecurity, this will come into use. If you are well on the way, it will also assist you. For example, if we talk about governance, the ISO 21434 standard, which should be released this year for the auto sector, is something we are talking about and pushing through the CyberKit 1.0, correct?
Definitely. Not only the ISO 21434, but something like the NIST cybersecurity framework also, which definitely is one of the base frameworks in cybersecurity. I do want to highlight that this the CyberKit was developed using the insights from the entire cybersecurity committee, and we had a wealth of knowledge in that committee, as Colin initially mentioned, from totally different sectors. So this document, the kit itself has perspectives from different people who have been in this field for a long while and have different perspectives.
Okay. Now, a general question to maybe both of you. When we talk about people working from home, the numbers are skyrocketing. Some of us rushed out with a laptop and a screen under our arms and jumped into our cars and have not gone back. Let's paint the picture on a granular level of 3 scenarios, and I'd ask both of you to comment. The individual one is somebody that's simply sending and receiving emails. Individual 2 is maybe an engineer, somebody that's involved in working with large file types and having to store those files. Where does he or she store those files, and how safe and secure is that scenario? And the third individual is a C-suiter, somebody whose complete portfolio is highly confidential, and there is IP embedded and involved in everything that he or she does. Can you tell us on a granular level, when it comes to cybersecurity and having to work remotely, how do these 3 individuals set themselves up in this new environment?
Ajay, do you want to take that first, and then I'll come in after?
Sure. So I will look at this from a risk assessment perspective. So what is required is, what is the risk from all these 3 individuals, and how can you look at that? So there are different methodologies. So you have to look at the vulnerabilities which are present in the apps which they are using. You have to look at the threats to those vulnerabilities, and then what will be the impact to the company if those threats happen. So the threats, the risks, the vulnerabilities, what we call the threat risk assessment has to be done. And this is something which will tell you that these different individuals have different risk profiles. And when they have different risk profiles, they have to be managed accordingly. Obviously, someone who's just sending and receiving emails does not have the same impact to the company, the risk impact, compared to the C-suite, who is handling highly confidential IP. So this is something where a thorough risk assessment has to be done. And based on that, controls have to be identified. And once you identify those controls, so for example, you might just accept the risk, you might want to transfer the risk, which is cyber insurance, or you might want to mitigate the risk, which is you might want to put some specific technologies such as Netscope. I think one of the most important things here which needs to be done is for companies to understand what are their critical assets, and those assets, which is basically their data, but it could be some apps also, it could be something else. What are their critical assets, and what is the impact to them as far as risk is concerned, and how to protect them. So this exercise definitely has to be carried out for all organizations who have moved to work from home environment.
Yeah, and coming at it from a technology point of view, prior to COVID-19, we were already seeing customers rethink the way that they architect their on-premise infrastructure. So prior to COVID-19, we already were seeing that the average enterprise, regardless if they're 50 users at a company all the way to some of our biggest customers, which are hundreds of thousands of users, they were already using over 1,200 applications prior to COVID-19. What that means is that people are using, think of tools like Google Drive, Box, Dropbox, Slack, Zoom. We were already using these type of applications. What Netscope does is, regardless of where the user is, so COVID-19 has just now provided additional ways now for companies to say, I know that my consumers or my employees are using applications that I am completely blind to. How do we secure that? So what Netscope does is we allow the user, regardless of what application they're into, we allow that user to use that application safely. So I'll give you an example. I deal with a lot of manufacturing companies. Some of them are the big autos. And their concern is, if my employee is working on a CAD drawing inside corporate OneDrive, how do I ensure he doesn't move that drawing to personal Dropbox? So that is the biggest concern with companies, with people working from home. How do I ensure that my employees aren't sharing this information outside the corporate application? And today we can give that visibility to the organization to say, allow your customers or your employees to use the apps that they want, but we can prevent risky behavior from happening within those specific applications.
I'd like to kind of, throw something back to maybe both of you. Doing risk mitigation for individuals working for an automotive company from home. And, how do you do this? How do they go about doing this now? Like, what personal information of mine would be required in order for us to do that assessment to make sure that I'm secure, one, and two, do cybersecurity insurance for a company now expand to me working from home? Am I now covered, or is my company now covered because I'm working from home? If those could be answered.
Yeah, I'll come at it, AJ, from a technology standpoint. A good question, Colin. So today what we do at Netskope is we say to a customer, it doesn't matter if Dhillon is working from home, if he goes on a business trip to Mexico, or he decides to take a trip to Europe on a vacation. Whatever website or application he goes to, no matter where he is in the world, he will get the same level of security, if not more, as if he was on-prem at his four walls. So basically, what our technology allows you to do is, no matter where you go, you can look at any website. We will help you not only when you go to that website, we look for things like phishing and malware. We would help you look at any application that user is going to, regardless of where you are in the world. And that is because customers today are starting to use a backbone infrastructure like Netskope, where we have 150 data centers around the world, as opposed to trying to build it themselves.
Yeah, and I think I would just to agree with Michael and emphasize that point. It doesn't matter where you're connecting from and how you're connecting. It's the data you're using. It's the apps you're using. So from a risk assessment point of view, you have to know what are your most critical assets, what is the most critical data which you need to protect, and who are the users who are using that data. So once you know that, then you can put in controls just for that particular data. So as an example, let's say that certain intellectual property is being used by a group of people and they are using a specific tool. So for them, there has to be controls in place, such as Netskope, and for that specific app where it is controlling who is accessing that data and how they are using it. But for others, you don't have to have that control in place. So if someone is just using an email, that it doesn't matter. So the most important thing for any organization is to identify what is the most critical information. And just to clarify on the information needed from an individual, I don't think any further information is needed if someone is working from home. It's the data which they are using and which is still the corporate data. So if a risk assessment has been carried out and if the controls are known, then as Michael mentioned, the person could be using not even his home computer, but maybe accessing from somewhere else if that person is traveling from a device which he has not recently used or will never use again. Still, those controls can be in place.
So let's move on to the next question, which is again about moving data. Michael, virtual private networks, VPNs, which have been around for what feels like decades, use public networks to allow for approved individual access to a company's private network. So it allows an individual to then send and receive data across what is a secured network. This now sounds ideal. We've heard so many people go on about, well, that's okay. I'm able to work from home using our company's VPN. But I think there's more to it. Can you expand about the pros and cons of today's VPN? You're on mute, by the way.
Thanks, Colin. You're right. Yeah, VPNs have been around for a very long time. And I would tell you that in the last month, they are probably being utilized more than they ever have since it's come to market. The problem with VPNs, and that's what we're starting to see now from our customers, so Netskope offers what we call a zero trust VPN or private access. So today what a VPN does is it allows a user to work from home and log back into the company's network. The problem with VPNs is when you log back into the company's network, you get access to the entire network, which sometimes creates more, risk, where a private VPN today, like ours, that has zero trust model, if Dhillon is trying to access corporate OneDrive, he will only get access to corporate OneDrive. So again, today, what we're seeing is companies are just, so I had a call today with a major bank in Canada, and their VPN is crumbling under the load. Why? They never, number one, spec'd it to handle what they're doing today. So now you've got 60,000 employees almost working from home. The other problem is to now make that a stronger and more secure environment, you have to throw more hardware at it. So the hardware model is going away. And now they're saying, why can't I just use a zero trust cloud model where if Dhillon wants access back to corporate, he does it through the cloud. I don't have to invest in any infrastructure. I don't have to invest in any hardware, and only allow him to access the app that he needs, not the entire network. But a VPN, to your point earlier, is what is required for most organizations to have a secure connection back to the corporate network.
And I would just like to add here that most organizations don't realize, but their current infrastructure anyways does not protect against data being kept in the cloud. So even if you are going through a VPN, many of your apps are not in the on-prem infrastructure. So if you're connecting to a VPN and then going back to the cloud, then it loses the security controls anyways.
So obviously that's a huge challenge. The fact that you could, in theory, open up the complete network for an individual that he or she doesn't actually need access to. There could be, depending on how the network's been developed and organized, you could have intellectual property files on that. Kind of continuing on with data and protected information, what checks and balances can be put into place to prevent employees from moving files over? How can a CAD file for a brand new product, which could make a company millions, continue to be protected whilst we work remotely?
This is very difficult. This is a challenge. There's really no way to stop that. So what I mean is today, companies use what is called a traditional firewall. And a firewall allows you a block